welcome. So in this video, we're going to learn together in detail about process costing, specifically using average method. So before we started, please remember about the difference between process costing and job order costing. In order to understand comprehensively these two methods of cost accumulation system, please do remember about some aspects that really differ, and maybe some of them are the same between job order costing and process costing. If we're talking about the process costing, please memorize that the type of product that produced using cost accumulation system process is really homogeneous, or in other words, the specification of the product that produced using process costing are all the same. Just imagine like Indomie, and then the soap, shampoo, etc. Now, if we're talking about the process costing, differ with the job order costing, where when we want to compute the total of cost production is just, manually adding the total of the direct material, direct labor, and factory overhead in each product. But in process costing, in order to know how much the total of the cost production, we need to make a cost production statement that we make it where the cutoff is based on the period. So the question later on will become how much the cost of production of the cutting department of February, and then how much the total of cost production of, let's say, assembling department in March. So the cost of production statement, the cutoff is based on the period of each department. Okay, that's differ with the job order costing. The cost accumulation is occur per product, but in process costing is per period and in detail for each department. So please do remember that the issue in the process costing about the cost of production itself, the cost of production using process costing require us to make a cost production statement. So this is the production cost statement look like. We see at a glance here, we have three main parts, right? Okay, so in order to understand how to compile this production cost statement comprehensively, we need to make the actual one by using the case, and so that we need an information. Okay, so let's make we compile together, based on our number case. Okay, so this is when we're talking about the process costing, actually we have two method, average and first in first out method. In this video we only talking about the average method, and then like I explained before, when we're talking about the process costing, we need to compute the production cost. The cutoff point is period for each department. So the issue will gonna be we made lots of production cost statement because we need to make the production cost statement for each department. And I will, tighten our discussion in here. We only discuss about the average method in the first department.
Okay, so for the second, third, etc. department, I only just explain it a little bit to show you what is the difference between the cost of production statement in the first department. And then, yeah, okay, so let's dig in together. So this is the quantity data about the case that we will discuss together, yeah. So this is the quantity data that we have to input this information in the production cost statement. We have an information about how much the total of the beginning work in process unit, and then how much the total of the unit of the transfer in, and then the transfer in the unit that will be transferred in certain department, and then how many units that will be transferred into next department. And then also we have the information about the total number of the ending work in process. And as you can see here, we got two departments. The first department is cutting department, and then the second is assembling department. And then, okay, let's take a look at this. What this number tell us? What this percentage number refer to? Okay, I will going back again in this table. For calculating the cost per unit, I think there is no big issue if we talking about the job order costing, because how to compute the cost per unit is literally we just divided the total cost, the total order cost, the total of the cost production divided with the total order quantity. So let's say this manufacturing company, this manufacturing company that using job order costing, let's say produce 3 type of bags, yeah. The first one is the traveling bag, and then this one for the school bag, and then the last one is for the party bag. Let's say for this period, this company produced the traveling bag. Let's say the total unit of it is 20 units based on the total order, right? And then for the school bag is 200 units. And then for the party bag, let's say 30 units. And then after the ending of the period, the company know that the total cost of production for the traveling bag is, let's say, 30 million. And then for this one is, let's say, 100 million. And for the party bag, let's say, 40 million. So when we want to know about how much the cost per unit for each of this type of bag, we literally only divide this number with this number. So that is the cost of production per unit for the traveling bag. And this is the same procedure also we apply for school bag and party bag to compute how much the cost of production per unit. But how about in the process costing? Just remember that the production process in the process costing is really continuously. It's kind of like unstoppable. Using machine, so that machine will always produce the unit unstoppable. Okay, but the issue in here is when we're talking about the cost per unit, we need to know the cutoff is per department and each the period. So how we compute, how we determine the total unit that has been produced. Okay, so that's really a tricky issue here in the process costing. We don't know exactly, we cannot determine exactly how many units that already produced in each department for each period. It's kind of like a tricky issue here, yeah. So in the process costing, we cannot easily determine how many units that already produced in each department for each period, because the production process is continuously. So for this issue, we have an assumption in the process costing to determine the total unit. We're using the concept of equivalent unit. So actually, the computation about the computation of the cost of production per unit in the process costing, the formula is just the same, yeah, the total cost divided with the total unit. But to determine the total unit in the process costing is a big issue in here, so we need an assumption, we need a calculation itself to determine the total unit by using equivalent concept, the equivalent unit concept. So just imagine if I just make a easy example. Yeah. Let's say that the company produced the chair, okay? We know together, and the chair is look like this, yeah. For the from the side, from the point of view in our side, yeah, the chair is look like this. And then let's say for the one period, this company producing so wait, in here I talking about the unit, the equivalent unit concept, yeah. So what is it? So let's say in this company, in this period, the company already produced so many chairs, and then the cut off until the end period, let's say in this point, the company produced so many chair, but there are some chair that not already finished 100%. Let's say only this part, let's say just like that, and then maybe the other chair like that, and then maybe the other chair like that. So there are some of the product that not complete 100%. So that is the equivalent unit. We determine that this product that unfinished is equal with what number of unit produced. So that is the equivalent unit. Even if the product is only finished 30%, 70%, 40%, we make a calculation in here to compute all of this unfinished product is equal with the what product, if we're talking about if the product is already finished 100%. So that is the concept of the equivalent unit. And don't worry, to compute the equivalent unit is actually we have the exact formula. We have to we can compute the equivalent unit easily by using the information of the data. Okay, so that is the concept of the equivalent unit in the process costing. So I will go back in here. I will show you the formula how to compute the equivalent unit. And remember, between the two methods in the process costing, the average method and the FIFO method, how to calculate the equivalent unit, the formula is different. Okay, so UE in here is referred to the equivalent unit, right? And then for the TO is transfer out. Remember this information? This one, the transfer out unit. Of course, the case problem will tell us about how many unit that will be transferred to the next department. And then for this one, is referred to the ending work in process. Okay, so the data will also tell us about that number, yeah, this one. And then, so that is the formula to compute the equivalent unit in if we using the average method. Transfer out plus the percentage of completion of the ending work in process. And then for the other method, for the FIFO, in here we got a more complex computation in here. So it's actually this one. I will use this formula. Transfer out plus the ending work in process, and then we continue that computation minus with the beginning work in process. Okay, so that is the formula, yeah, to compute the equivalent unit. And don't worry, you just need to remember the exact formula to compute it, and then just enter the number that already been told by the case problem. Okay, so beside the information about the quantity data, in order to complete a cost production statement, we also need the information about the total cost itself. Okay, so this is the next information that we need to know about the cost production data. Yeah, so how much the total cost of the beginning work in process, how much the total cost of the direct material, direct labor, and overhead, okay? And then how much also the total cost that added in the current period. So let's say we make a cost production statement for the period March 2021. So we need the information about how much the total cost that we added in certain department for that period, for the direct material, direct labor, and overhead. So we need the information about this. Okay, so please remember, in order to make the cost production statement of the process costing using, whether it is using the average or the FIFO method, we need the information about the basic quantity data, about all of this. Okay, and then also we need information about the cost production data, about all of it. And don't forget, in the case problem, they must be tell us about these two type of information: basic quantity data and cost production data. Okay, so I will continue my explanation in this slide. Okay, let's go back to the issue of the equivalent unit. Okay, so this is the important issue because, and take a look at this first. In the production cost statement, in the second part, we need to input the equivalent unit information. Okay, so that is the important matter, and I suggest you to compute the unit equivalent before you making the production cost statement. Okay, so we need to compute this thing together. So I will go back again to that slide. So this is the computation. For compute the equivalent unit computation, we need to compute for each three type of cost of production. So we need to compute how much the equivalent unit for direct material, and then how much the equivalent for direct labor, and also for the factory overhead. So take a look at this number. We got the unit transfer out 500 here is actually, of course, based on the information of the data. Let's take a look at the transfer out here. Okay, we first compute for the first department, yeah, the cutting department. So just focus on this column. For the transfer out, we got this number as the total of the transfer out, right? And then don't forget the next computational is we have to edit that number, the transfer out number, with the percentage completion of the ending working process. Okay, so that is this percentage tell us about. So the computation of the equivalent unit require us to know the assumption how the progress of the completion of the inventory. And in this problem we have information that for the direct material is finished about 80% in the cutting department, and then for direct labor is finished about 40% in the cutting department, and then for the factory overhead is finished about equal with the 60% in the cutting department. So we need to multiply the unit of the, the ending, yeah. Okay, the ending is in this, yeah. I'm sorry, in this part, the bottom part, yeah. The ending is on here. So we need to multiply this tree of percentage number with the number of the ending work in process for that department, for the first department, cutting department. So we need to multiply for the direct material 200 with 60%, and then for direct labor 200 with the 20%, and for the factory overhead 200 with the 40%. So we literally multiply one by one 100 with this percentage number. For the direct material will go in this number, and then for the direct labor 40, right? 20% multiplied with 200, and then for the factory overhead is 80. And then we got the equivalent for the cutting department for the each three types of production cost. We have this number as the equivalent unit for the direct material, this number for direct labor, and this one plus this one is this number for the factory overhead. And then you can continue your computation of the equivalent unit in the second department, yeah, for the assembly department, and just the same, but be careful in using which number. Okay, so for the assembling department, for the second department, we use this number, yeah, with this percentage of number. So 100 multiplied with 100 for the direct material, 100 multiplied with 70% for the direct labor. So as you can see here, in here, right? And then also for the unit transfer out, be careful. The number will be different with the cutting department because the transfer out in here telling us about the unit that will be transferred from the cutting department to the assembly department, which is this number. But for the assembly department, let's say this manufacturing process only require us to processing the unit in the two department only. So we can say that after the assembly department is the finished good warehouse. So the transfer out in here is telling us about the unit that will be transferred to the finished goods warehouse from the assembly department. So be careful in using which one the number to compute all of this, and also to make the cost production statement. Please be careful, yeah, in reading the data. Okay, so we have I will copy paste this table to our Excel. Okay, so talking about the equivalent unit in here, yeah, we already computed together. This is for the first department, and then this is for the second department. I will, okay, so this is the final number. I'm sorry. So this is the final number that will be input in this part. Okay, so this is time to for me to explain in detail how to make the production cost statement. So as you can see here, go back again to this production cost statement. There are three main parts of the production cost statement. The first part talking about the quantity data, and then for the second and third part is talking about the cost. Okay, so actually to complete the first part of the quantity data is actually we only need the information that coming from the quantity data information only. But for the second and the third part of the cost production statement, we need the information of the cost production data in here. So that's why there are two main information that we need to know to complete the production cost statement, because it's related with the part of the cost production statement itself. So in this quantity data information is related to the making of the first part of the cost production statement, and the cost production data is referred to the completion of the second and the third part of the cost production statement. So go back again to this basic quantity data. As you can see here, for the quantity data, we need to input the information about the beginning work in process and then the transfer in. The beginning work in process plus transfer it, we call it the number of unit processed. And then next, we input the information about the transfer out unit and then the ending work in process. And these two numbers, if we add it together, we call it the number of units produced. Okay. And then for the next information that we need to input in here, don't forget about the percentage of completion of each three type of cost production in here. We got the direct material, direct labor, and factory overhead. So because we using the average method, remember about the formula to compute the unit equivalent, we only need the information about the percentage of completion for the ending work in process. So take a look at our data in here. Okay, for the ending work in process, we making the cost of production statement. Yeah, so we input this number, the percentage of completion of this number in the direct material and direct labor and factory overhead cell. 60, 20, and 40 for the ending work in process. 60, 40, and 20. Okay. Okay, don't forget before you input the main information on these three parts, don't forget to explain the title of the statement. Okay, so the first row is referred to the name of the company, and then we're talking about the first department in here, and the first department is the cutting department. And then first explain also about the method that we use in here. We use the average method, and then this is the production cost statement. So this is the title of the production cost statement, okay? Okay, so yeah, we input the information of the beginning work in process, transfer it, etc. So take a look in here. For the cutting department, the transfer in is 600 and the ending is 200. I'm sorry. This is okay. The ending is, we need to input it one by one. Okay. We need to focus one by one. Beginning work in process in cutting department. Beginning work in process in cutting department is 100. Okay. And then the transfer out unit and the ending work in process. The transfer out unit is 500 and the ending is 200. Okay, finish, yeah? Only like that. Please take a look at the red color in here, the red color part about the total of the beginning work in process with the transfer in is 700, and then the total of the transfer out plus ending work in process is also 700. Please remember, guys, this number must be balanced. Okay, so the number of units processed with the number of units produced must be balanced. Okay, so how much the unit that will be processed is also the unit that finally will be produced. So these two numbers must be balanced. Okay, 700, 700. Please make sure in the quantity data part, the information about the number of unit processed and the produced is the same. So be careful in entering the data. Okay, so next, for the second part, the total cost applied. Okay, so now, before I'm explaining in detail about the second and the third part of the cost production statement, I will giving you a hint, a rule of thumb of the production cost statement. And if you really understand about this rule of thumb, you will find that actually to making the production cost statement is actually really easy. It's not a really difficult thing. Okay, the hint is like this. Go back again to the first part of the production cost statement, which talking about the quantity data. I will show you that actually, yeah, this part, I will give this part the orange color, okay, which talking about the unit, about how many the unit of the beginning work in process, transfer in, and then the total of it, which called the number of unit processed, is actually the rupiah amount, the dollar amount of this unit is located on the second part of the production cost statement. Okay, so this number 100 unit of the beginning work in process, the total cost is in here, and then the transfer in, the unit that will be added on this current month for the production process, which is about 600 unit in here, will be located, the information about the cost in this part, the current month. And then so for the total cost, is the total of the cost of the beginning work in process and the current month. In here is actually talking about the total of the cost of number of units processed. Okay, so the rupiah amount or the dollar amount of this orange area is located on the second part of the production cost statement. And then the rest, the remaining part, I will giving this part the purple color. Okay, so the rupiah amount, the dollar amount of the transfer out unit, the ending work in process unit, which is 500 plus 200, becoming the numbers of unit produced, 700 in here, will be located on the third part of the production cost statement. Okay, so this is actually really linked to each other. For the first, second, third part of the production cost statement is linked each other. Okay, so the first part is talking about the quantity data, and then the second and the third data is talking about the rupiah or the dollar amount, which is if we break down to the specific part, for the beginning work in process plus transfer in unit is located, information about the rupiah and the dollar is located on the second part. And then the information about the rupiah or the dollar amount of the transfer out unit and ending work in process is located on the third part of the production cost statement. Okay, as you can see here, the transfer out unit 500. This is the information of cost about it. And then also the ending work in process 200 unit in here, and this is the information of the rupiah or the dollar amount of the ending work in process. Please remember this rule, so in order you don't have to remember it in a harder way. Just thinking it logically, just thinking it that each other of this part is linked to each other, so then you will find that how to make this production cost statement is actually really easy one. Okay, I will continue. So now we have to complete we have to fill in the missing information of the second part of the production cost statement. So we have to go back to the case. So now, because we're talking about the cost production data, so we have to take a look closer in this information. Not again, we're talking about the unit, yeah, because the unit is on the first part of the cost production statement. So now in the second and the third part of the cost production statement, we need to concentrate of the information about the cost, about the rupiah, about the dollar. Okay. So because we're making for the first department, which is the cutting department, please just focus of this number. And then we got the information that this is the information about the beginning work in process. Okay. And then this is the cost added in the current period. So this is talking about the transfer in unit. And then we need to input one by one of this number to the certain cell, to the correct cell. We go back again. So remember, for the beginning work in process in here, we got this number as the cost amount of the direct material, direct labor, and the overhead. So we input the information of the beginning work in process. Right? So this is the beginning work in process cost information. And then for the current month or for the transfer in unit, the information is here. Okay. We put to the cells. Right? And then we have the next column. Talking about the total cost, we just adding this number, the beginning work in process cost with the current month cost, and then the same also for the direct labor and the factory overhead, right? So, guys, I will tell you again. So, for the 100 beginning work in process, the total of the cost, the detailed information about the cost is here. And then for the transfer in unit, about 600 units, the information about the cost is in this column. And then, okay, the total cost. So the next column, talking about the equivalent unit. We already compute the unit equivalent, the equivalent unit of each direct material, direct labor, and factory overhead. For the average method, we have the number is this, yeah? I'm sorry, it don't have to be the minus part. I don't know why after I copy paste in here, the negative part is automatically showing up. So this number is the equivalent for direct material, and then this number, yeah, for the direct labor, and the last one for the factory overhead is here. Okay, so next column is talking about the cost per unit. The cost per unit, we just dividing the total cost with the unit equivalent. Remember about the rule of how to compute the cost per unit in the process costing. We have to the formula is just the same with the job order costing. We dividing the total cost with the unit, but because to determine unit in the process costing is really difficult than the job order costing. So we got this concept, the equivalent unit, and how to compute is on this part. So the cost per unit is just the same, yeah? Dividing the total cost with the equivalent unit. And then we have to sum the number of the total cost in here. Okay, and this is the total cost of the cost per unit of each product. So guys, this number, the number of units processed, about 700 units in here, the total cost applied for the 700 unit is this number, with the production cost per unit is this number. Okay, so we finished talking about the rupiah or the dollar amount of the orange part in here. So now let's continue for the third part about the cost calculation, about the rupiah or the dollar amount of this purple area. The rupiah of the transfer out unit, the rupiah of the ending work in process unit, and the rupiah of the total, the number of units produced. Okay, so we got the information that the unit that will be transferred to the next department, which is the assembly department, is 500, right? So we input, so we input the 500 in here because the transfer out unit is 500. And then the cost per unit is, we got the calculation from the previous part in the second part, which is 50, the cost per unit. And then we just multiply it. 500 with 50. Okay, so the rupiah amount, the dollar amount of the transfer out unit about this 500 unit that will be transferred to the next department, to the assembly department, is 25,000. So this 500 unit, the rupiah amount is 25,000. Okay, so next, how about the total of the rupiah or the dollar amount of the ending work in process unit? So yeah, we just enter the information. For the ending work in process is 200 unit, but remember, because not all of them is already finished perfectly 100%, don't forget to multiply the 200 amount in here with each of the percentage completion of for direct material, direct labor, and factory overhead. So for the direct material in here, we got 200 multiplied with 60%. And then for the direct labor, 200 multiply it with the 20%. And the last one, the 200 in here will be multiplied with the 40% for the factory overhead. And then for the cost per unit, we just entering the information from the second part in this part, yeah. The cost per unit for the direct material is 25, and then 10 for the labor, and the last one, 15 for the factory overhead. And then for the total cost, we just multiply again the total unit in here with the cost per unit, right? And then we drag it. So we got the cost production of the ending work in process is the sum amount of this, okay? 3,400 and 1,200. Okay, and then so when we ask about how much the dollar or the rupiah amount of the ending work in process in here, so we got the answer. We just got the answer that the cost production of ending work in process about to 100 unit in here is this number, 4,600. Again, so how much the total amount, the rupiah amount of number of unit produced in here? 700. Yeah, we just adding this number, the unit of the transfer out unit, 25,000 with the rupiah amount of the ending work in process. Take a look again. This number is actually the same with the cost calculation in the second part. Do you guys know why? Why it is the same? Because remember of the rule of thumb in the first part, the number of unit processed must be balanced with the number of unit produced. 700 unit is the same with the 700 in here, must be balanced. So because of these units are already balanced, so then of course for the rupiah amount or the $4 amount, in the second and the third part will also show the exact number, the same number. So how do you know how do we know if our calculation of the production cost statement in here is already correct? If the second and the third part of your production cost statement show the same amount for the production cost total in here with the production cost total in here, so then your answer is right. Yeah, remember, because this unit is balanced, so of course the dollar amount or the rupiah amounts of this units will be balanced too. Okay, so the 700 of the number of units processed, the total rupiah amount is this number, and the same with the number of units produced, 700 in here, the total of the cost production will also the same. Okay, so that's how to make the production cost statement. But remember, this is only the issue for the first department, yeah, using the average method. And now maybe the next question. Okay, so how about the process of making the production cost statement for the second department? There must be something different with the first department. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so maybe I will show you in a fast manner so you can see what is the difference. So we continue our discussing in here from this case in the slide. Yeah, so we enter now the information about the unit for the assembling department. Okay, so this is the beginning work in process, and then this is the transfer in, this is the transfer out, and this is the ending work in process. So we enter the information, this number. Okay, so the total of the units processed are this number, and then for the transfer out unit, because there is no next department in here, so we assume that the final department in here is the finished good warehouse. So this is the unit that will be transferred to the warehouse of the finished goods. And then don't forget to enter the information of the percentage completion of the direct material, direct labor, and factory overhead of the ending work in process. Okay, so maybe before we continue to the second and the third part, we go back again to the calculation of the equivalent unit. Now, this is the first difference between the process of making production cost statement in the first and the second department. As you can see, the last one from the first department, the issue to compute the equivalent unit is literally only for the three production cost part, okay, direct material, direct labor, and factory overhead. But if we enter to the second department, there will be one additional computation that we need to compute how much the equivalent unit, which is the previous department. For the information about the percentage completion of direct material, direct labor, and factory overhead, we got the information. I'm sorry, maybe there is a mistake here. We go back to the one. Okay, for the ending work in process, 170. Okay, Okay, so the percentage completion, sorry, for the direct material, direct labor, and factory overhead is actually known from the problem. But how much the percentage completion of the previous department that we need to compute to? The assumption, yeah, of the percentage completion for the from the previous department is always 100. Okay, the assumption of the percentage completion of the previous department is always 100. Even though the problem not telling us about that, we will directly know that the percentage of completion from the unit that coming from the previous department is always 100% because it's already complete, right? That's why we now entering to the department 2, because everything that already processed it in the first department is already complete. Okay, so why? So that's why the percentage of completion from the previous department is always 100. Okay, so now we enter about the computation of the unit transfer out in here, which is this number 580. And then now for the ending working process is 100, multiply it with each percentage of completion, right? And then we adding the number. Okay, so this is the unit equivalent, yeah, for the previous department, direct material, direct labor, and factory overhead. Okay, now, as you can see, yeah, differ with the department 1 for the second part. In the first department, we just literally writing down the direct material, direct labor, and factory overhead. But now in the second department, so this is the second difference, is that the first line is the total cost applied from previous department. Remember, in the previous calculation of the third part, we got the information, we got the calculation that the cost of production of the units that will be transferred to the next department, which is this unit, 500, is the calculation of the total amount of the rupiah or the dollar of this 500 is this number, right? The transfer to the next department. So this number will go to the second part of the next production cost statement. Okay, so this number 25,000 will enter to this number, will enter to this part. Okay, the current month cost from the previous department. And then for the rest area, which is still missing in here, we just input it again from the information from the problem. This, yeah, the cost production data. Cost added in the current period for the assembling department is here. So we enter, this is for the cost added in the current period, and then the beginning work in process cost is here. Okay, so we entering the information of this, yeah, cost from previous department, and then this number, and this number to the beginning work in process cost column. And then for the current month from the previous department, we take this number from the previous department, yeah. So this is the specific is on the current month section. Okay, and then for the direct material, direct labor, and factory overhead, again from the problem, this number, right? So we enter, we moving this number to this column. right? And then now for the total cost, yeah, the total cost, okay. And then for the unit equivalent is the calculation in here, yeah, that we already compute. That's for the previous department. And then this is for the direct material. And then this is for the direct labor. And the last one also the same number for the factory overhead. And then the cost per unit, again, we just define this total cost with the equivalent unit. And then we got the number of the total cost of the unit that process it in the second department. Is this number. And then cost per unit also the total all of them, yeah, not only the direct material, direct labor, and FOH, but also the cost per unit from the previous department. Okay, so now for the third part of the cost calculation, the first is transferred into the finished good warehouse. The transfer out unit, which is the 580 here, how much the total cost of it? Yeah, we just multiply this unit with the cost per unit, right? Okay, so the total cost is it, right? And then now we're talking about how much the total of the rupiah or the dollar for the 100 ending work in process in here. Okay, so don't forget again, there is a ending work in process from previous department. I highlighted in the red color so that you aware that is the difference between the second and the first production cost statement. So this is the ending. I think this is not the 60, yeah, but 70, right? So the cost per unit, we got the information from here, okay? Previous department, direct material, direct labor, and factory overhead. So this is the multiply with these two columns. So now we got the total of the cost production of ending work in process is the sum all of in this part, yeah. So we got this is the total of the cost production of ending work in process. And then for the total of cost production between the total of the transfer out unit and the ending work in process, we just add this number, yeah, the transfer into finished good warehouse cost with the total cost of the ending work in process. Take a look. The number, remember, must be balanced. So now we know that our answer is correct because the total of the cost production between the second and the third part show the same amount. Remember why it will be the same amount? Yeah, because the number of unit processed and the number of unit produced is balanced. Okay, so this is always becoming the rule of thumb of the cost production statement. And remember, the one that I'm sorry, I will change it. The one that I adding the red color in here, the red color in here is the difference between the first and the second production cost statement. In the first department, in the first department, there is no issue about the thing that coming from the previous department, right? But for the second department, starting from the calculation of the equivalent unit, we have to compute the equivalent unit from previous department. And remember, the assumption of the percentage completion is always 100%. And then the second difference is that on the second part, the first line is the thing, yeah, from previous department. And don't forget, this number 25,000 we got from the calculation of the third part of the first department. So we cannot finish our production cost statement for the second department if we not finish the calculation of the first department. So we have to finish all of them in this first department until we got mainly about the information, the total cost that transfer into the next department, that this number will goes to the current month section of the total cost applied, the second part of the second production cost statement, the second department. Okay, and then again in the third part about the calculation, we also have the from previous department line on the ending work in process, and remember again the percentage completion is 100. Okay, so that's it, the explanation about the how to make a production cost statement with using average method for the first and the second department. So thank you and see you on the next video.